G'day everyone, welcome back to another live hangout here at Voice Essentials, the second for 2024. I hope you're well. I'm half expecting to have a small crowd today because, of course, the Super Bowl is currently playing. It is in the last, well, certainly when I walked back from the next room, it was in its fourth quarter, locked at 16 all. And and I purposefully tuned in. We are having it, transmitted all the way here to Australia. I'm in Brisbane, Australia, and it is it's just gone 1 p.m. as it does every Monday when we tune in for our live hangout together. But it's just gone fourth quarter. I tuned in. I particularly wanted to watch the halftime show with Usher, and got to, as a bonus, I didn't realize Alicia Keys would be playing and joining in as well, and it's quite a few extra artists in there, and it was, what I really enjoyed about the show was the live vocal. There was quite a bit of pre-recorded vocal. Everything was obviously being done to a click track, which you would expect for a show of such magnitude, but right from the get-go, it was live vocal from Usher interspersed with recorded vocal by Usher, and certainly that was my interpretation of what I was listening to, and I just thought, man, go for it. That was, in today's settings, such a brave performance choice to have live vocal in that kind of, like the Super Bowl, right? Massive, and so all credit to Usher. Like it was great. The dancing was obviously fantastic. Let me know in the live hangout what in the live comments what you thought of the show, if you caught it. Though, if you've tuned into the show, you're possibly not into the NFL. Can I be honest and say, I don't regularly watch the NFL. It's not really on my sports radar. But I do know that the 49ers, who are playing against the Kansas City Chiefs, is that correct? In the Super Bowl right now, and it might even be over by now. I don't know. No spoilers in this show because I don't know what the outcome is. The kicker for the 49ers is an Aussie, and so I've been kind of going for the 49ers. Also, one of my American students, I teach a lot of private singing lessons to students overseas online, and one of my students is a massive 49ers fan, and so I hope for him that the 49ers get up. But of course, there's been the whole Tay Kelsey, is it Kelsey? Somebody. I haven't been, intently following the love story between Tay and I want to say Kelsey something. I don't know. I don't know. Is it? I don't even know if it's Kelsey. Anyway, so everyone's been tuning in for those reasons as well. So, just to draw a line under the sports, if you're interested in sports, the game I follow, our winter game here in Australia, there's two main winter games here in Australia, because we're about to head into our winter as the Northern Hemisphere heads into their spring and then into their summer. As we head into our winter, the two main sports here in Australia are Australian rules and Aussie rules, it's often referred to, which I don't really follow. But then there's another game called NRL, the National Rugby League. If you like NFL, you'll like the brutality of the NRL, because it's a brutal sport. And I follow that quite closely during the winter. Well, the reason I mention it is because my team, Manly,
the Manly Warringah Sea Eagles are playing the South Sydney Rabbitohs in Las Vegas. It's kind of a special promotional game. They're playing in Las Vegas, not this weekend, but next. And so I'm looking forward to watching that. And if you're an American, then you might like to tune in and have a watch and see how us Aussies do football. I mean, I've been watching the NFL, and it looks pretty brutish. But you wait until you see the Aussie boys go at it. It's hardcore. Okay, want to just tell you very quickly about next week's show. We have Kelly McDowell joining us, and as I shared last week, Kelly recently contacted me to ask if I could give permission to be quoted in her upcoming book, and which I was more than happy to give permission for, and so as a reciprocation, I asked if she would come onto the show. We're going to be talking really interesting subject. We're going to be talking about the tongue and tone, and what I find really fascinating about the timing of that is literally in my last lesson this morning, prior to coming on, my 10 a.m. lesson, we were doing so much work on the implication of the tongue and the tongue root and how it can find itself bearing down on the top of the hyoid and bracing the larynx, and the impact it has not only on tone but on vowel shape and these sorts of things. I think you're going to find next week's show really interesting, really fascinating. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and the white bell icon just so you receive the notification. It will be at the same time, Monday, 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And I'm looking forward to spending that time talking with Kelly about those things and meeting her, because I'm yet to actually meet her in person. And so she is a brand new, fresh face for us, our first guest for 2024, and I think it'll be a really great show, really informative. The tongue is so important. I often think of the tongue like the rudder on a ship. I mean, the rudder on a ship is really kind of a small component, right? And yet it can direct the entire boat, ship. You can tell I'm not a seaman. It can direct the whole boat, and yet it's such a small thing. The tongue is the same. The tongue has such a big part to play in your singing. And so I'm very much looking forward to spending that time with her, talking about that subject. We're going to get into your questions. If you have questions, and if you're new to the show, and I can see we've got a few people watching. Like I said, it's Super Bowl night, so I kind of expected it to be a quieter one. We've already got a couple of questions, which is great. Leave your questions in the comments. You do have to have subscribed to leave a question, and that's part of our sort of safety mechanism, if you will, the first sort of layer of safety for keeping the comments safe from trolling and what have you. And the next layer of safety is Linda, who will take your question when you do subscribe and write your question into the comments. Linda will grab your question and she will put that into a Google Doc, which I'm looking at right over there, and we've already got 2. So if you absolutely must have your question answered today, in so much as you don't want to sort of miss out today, then you can always put a super chat and we prioritize. Otherwise, we just go through them chronologically. But if you want your question answered today, make sure you hit a super chat, and all those proceeds go back into running the show, because it's not cheap, as I've said many times before, to do so. Let's dive in. I think there was something else I was going to share, but I can't think of what it was. So we're just gonna get in here, and hopefully, maybe if it was important, I'll remember before the show's out. Otherwise, let's get into the questions.
Okay, our first question comes from DBA Winchester. And DBA's written a good question, tuning in from the US, and that was in response to Linda asking everyone to let us know where you're from. And it is always good to know where you're from. And in the case of DBA, evidently you're not watching the Super Bowl. Not everyone's into sports, and that's okay. And I'm glad, well, for our little show, I'm glad some people aren't into sports because you're tuning into the show. Tuning in from the US, my question is, how would I go about singing again after recovering from a bad cold like COVID? Well, and we talked a bit about this last week, I think. Yeah, because I answered the same kind of question from Mackenzie. The thing about COVID as opposed to your bad cold, your cold and flu, I do think we have to approach them differently in relationship to our singing. It's interesting. I know that here in Australia, the medical professionals, and I'm going to say this again, I am not a medical professional. It is not for me to provide medical advice. That is not my qualification. I am an academic level doctorate. And so, yes, I am Dr. Dan, because I'm often asked that. Are you actually really a doctor? Yes, I really am, but not a medical doctor. And so it's really important that, you know, in every instance when we're talking around the space of health, that you refer back to your trusted, licensed healthcare professional. Don't just take stuff off Google, because there are so many nuances that need to be discussed with your doctor. But we can give some really general overarching thoughts that are relatively well accepted. Around COVID, here in Australia, we're constantly being reminded that, in fact, COVID is not your just average run-of-the-mill flu. It is having significant, and for some people, long-lasting chronic impact on the health of their bodies. And certainly the observations that I've made anecdotally is that students of singing appear to be taking much longer to recover vocally. And so I've had a long-standing rule, which I've shared on YouTube, called the ×2 rule. And the ×2 rule says, for acute sickness, we're talking your everyday cold and flu, for every day that you're sick, you can expect the voice to take about 2 days to recover. So if you're sick for about 3 or 4 days, you can expect it to take anywhere between 6 to 8 days for your voice to fully recover after you've started getting better. It's a rule of thumb. It's completely, you have to, it's not hard and fast is what I'm getting at. With COVID, my observation is that it's taking 3 to 4 times the length to get better. So if you're sick with COVID for about, a week, which is not an uncommon length for COVID, 5 to 7 days, it's taking in the vicinity of 15 to 20 days, up to 3 weeks, and for some longer, to recover vocally. And I'm certain there is more research to be done in this space as to why, and I know there is ongoing research around COVID and the effect on voice, but regardless of whether it's, I'm again coming back to DBA's question, regardless of whether it's COVID or just a bad cold, you have to allow your body to heal. So many of us in this really rushed modern life want to get back to full speed as soon as you can. And as a result, I think many of us
me included, we rush back into things, you know, earlier than we probably should. And as a result, that recovery time is often prolonged. And whereas if you maybe took more time off early on, you would recover quicker. But it's just so important that you give your body that opportunity to recover, because we need the voice to heal. And be patient with your voice. I'm often saying to students, be gracious to your voice, be patient. Don't expect it to be at full speed 3 or 4 days after you're unwell and you're feeling better. The voice takes time, and you do yourself a great disservice by rushing that. And I know there are times when, for a number of different reasons, perhaps you're a professional singer, and the consequence of that is that you have to be back on stage. There is no way of finding a depth singer, or it's not possible to cancel. These are all very real circumstances. In those times, I'm always encouraging singers to manage their vocal during that period. Be careful in what you expect of your voice when it is not feeling 100%. And really do all the things, all the smart things that you know to do. Be disciplined in your warm-ups. Make sure you ease the voice into your set or sets multiple. And then do a vocal warm down. If you have a nebulizer, use your nebulizer. If you only have a steamer, use it post-voice use. Do all the smart things. I was saying to a student, my 9 o'clock this morning, and for those of you who have not tuned into this show, I am actually, yes, I'm relatively present online with coming up to over, have I got over 900? It'd be getting close to 900 videos online. But I have taught many and continue to teach many more private singing lessons. I am a professional singing teacher by trade, and that's what I do, which is why I do this show. Anyway, 9 o'clock this morning, we were talking about the fact that her voice was not feeling up to speed, and she was really feeling quite fatigued, and she also teaches voice, and we're just talking about that fatigue. And I was saying to her, it's funny, as singing teachers, we often forget to apply the very things that we know we should do to our own voice during these times of fatigue or illness. And I've definitely fallen prey to my own forgetfulness. It's so important. It's one thing to know what to do, right? It's another thing to actually get the benefit from having done them. And I want to really encourage you, make sure you do all those things. And above all else, hydrate. Make sure you are getting that really high level of hydration, that systemic hydration, to make sure that your voice is able to be completely lubricated, that any residual swellings and those sorts of things is being flushed because you've got good hydration. These are all so important for you to be doing. DBA, I hope that's all really helpful. What have we got here? This is Liliana. Is that how I say your name, Liliana? I hope so. Liliana's asking us a question here. Just going to bring that down a bit. Dr. Dan, thanks for everything. Liliana, again, I hope that's how I say your name. You're welcome. I have a question. Do you have some tips to sing with confidence and peace? Of course, when you have the study and technique. I think one of the key things that leads to a sense of confidence and peace, and I love the way you've used the word peace there, is technique. When I have a new student join me, it's not unusual, and I think this is a great question to ask. They'll often ask, what can I expect to gain from, let's say, the first 6 to 12 months of lessons? And my number one thing that I always say, the number one thing you can expect to gain is a sense of confidence. And that's not purely about performance, though it certainly is a part of it, but it's a sense of confidence in you knowing why you're doing what you're doing. So many singers are stepping onto stage, opening their mouths and hoping for the best. And for me, that is not going to engender confidence. When I'm like on a wing and a prayer, I'm hoping everything just goes okay. Whereas when we develop technique and we formulate a really strong knowledge of the voice, we create a really good kinesthetic awareness of our instrument, that is, having a really good body-mind connection, and we intimately know the voice. This is the other thing, is that so many students will say, I just don't feel like I know my own voice. Well, we develop that by spending time with our voice, just like any relationship, right? You develop stronger relationships through time spent with said person, in this case, your voice. And when you do, you gain a sense of confidence. You learn to be able to trust your voice, not only when it's in great condition, but more importantly, when it's not so 100%. That's not to say it's not usable in so much as, oh, I shouldn't sing at all. No, that, anything. I'm going to throw out some really generalized statistics, not statistics, some numbers, just for us to work with on an analogy level. I reckon you should be able to use your voice with a relative sense of it's okay to do so. If it's, it's everything 75%, maybe 70% and above. It's very rare for your voice to be in like 95 to 100%. And in fact, if you're a working singer, you know what I'm talking about, right? Your voice, very rarely you step on the stage and your voice is like at its absolute premium. More often than not, you are working with a voice that is okay, it's good, but it's just not great in its best optimal condition. That is so normal. But anything 70, 75% and lower, we're getting into that zone of, I'm going to really have to really manage my voice here today because I'm not well, or it's fatigued to the point of concern. And then when we get down below the 50% mark, maybe we're starting to go, I need to really strongly consider, do I step on the stage? And having spent the time with your voice, having gotten to know it, having developed your technique, that gives you the confidence to know where your voice is at and to really be able to just know what you're going to get and know what to expect of your voice. And Liliana, that's what I would be encouraging you to do in that regards. And all of this, really, that sense of confidence speaks into that sense of peace, that sense of reducing your sense of that sense of reduced performance anxiety. And you know, it's important to reduce that performance anxiety, but not with a sense, let me change that wording, not to reduce it, but to learn to manage it. And when you can get that sense of managing your performance anxiety, that is, it's not escalating beyond your sense of control, then you are able to really keep everything in check and remain in that zone of being at peace. And it all ties in, doesn't it? You can't just have peace without the confidence, without the technique. It's, you know, and those who might suggest that they do, I think are working within the zone of perhaps being naive, innocently so, ignorantly so, but in doing this singing thing, and if you do it long enough, and if you find yourself working as a singer, you know that those really harder, more challenging times will come. Not might come, or, you know, come for other singers. No, they will come for you. And it's good to have done all of that hard work that gets done in the rehearsal space. It's good to have done all of that work at a prior time. Liliana, I hope that's really helpful. Yeah, so we've got one question here from I'm going to come over to here because this is fun. I've just seen oh no, that's Mr. Fomiati. No, I'm going to come to Mr. Fomiati's question in a moment. I clicked the wrong thing. This is what I saw. Linda saying, well, you know much more than I do about the NFL and Super Bowl. Not much more, Linda. I was watching the show, watching the game, and most of it was gobbledygook to me. I had, you know, 2nd and 2, and, you know, it was... I didn't know what was going on. I kind of knew what a touchdown was. I could see what a goal was, but half the time I didn't know. One day, what I'd like to do one day is sit down with someone who really knows the game, probably an American, and have them patiently explain to me what on earth is going on. Because I really don't have any idea. So there you go, Linda. I'm glad for you, as a fellow Australian, you thought I knew what I was talking about. No, I do not. I had no idea. Does anyone? We probably shouldn't put the score up just in case we do a spoiler for anyone. I think surely the game is over by now. As I said. It was a locked tie with like 5 or 6 minutes to go just before I jumped on. So I would think the game's finished. So I would think someone has. Oh, DBA, DBA has just said this. I'm going to get to your question in a minute, Mr. Fomiati. It's okay, Dr. Dunn. I'm American. I barely understand the sport. Well, then with all due respect, DBA, you're probably not the right person to be sitting next to me watching the game, explaining what's going on. But that being said, you almost certainly still know more than what I do. And I'd be happy to reciprocate. We could then sit down and watch a great game of rugby league, and I could explain pretty much every rule. I love watching rugby league, and I could reciprocate the favour. Okay, let's come back to Mr. Fomiati. Here we have a question. I need to sing 3 James Brown songs for Diploma of Music at TAFE. Any help? Because he's put in the next comment. Please, what does it say? Please help, please, Dr. Dan. Do you know what? And this all often gets heard, I think, as a throwaway answer, but it really isn't, Dom. Mr. Fomiati, as you're known here on YouTube. I want you to eat, breathe, and sleep James Brown. When I did my undergrad in jazz voice at the Queensland Conservatorium, I can tell you that jazz was not in my blood. I didn't grow up listening to any jazz. I'd come across from classical voice, and the reason I came across from classical was because the classical singing just didn't speak to me, and as a result, I didn't connect with it. But I can tell you, I had heard much more classical music growing up than I'd heard jazz. And you might think to yourself, well, then why would you want to? Anyway, long story short, I actually quite enjoyed singing jazz and the challenge of it, and I felt like I could connect with it better than classical, even though I hadn't really grown up listening to it. So I really was starting that journey with jazz well behind the 8 ball. And so consequently, and my wife can attest to this because it's, well, she preferred listening to the jazz more so than the classical that I had to for my 2 years of classical voice. But we didn't listen for 3 years of my jazz bachelor. We didn't listen to anything else. I consumed so much jazz. I had it on in the house. I had it on in the car. I played it. The only time I didn't play it was when I was asleep. Consequently, I started to imbibe the music. You start to hear things that your cursory listening, your superficial listening just cannot hear. But as I started to become more attuned to the nuances through my listening process, I started to become able to sing it better. I don't think I ever became a great jazz singer, but I was passable. And so, Mr. Fomiati, I want to encourage you. You need to eat, breathe, and sleep James Brown and artists of like. So try to identify those artists that would be James Brown's contemporaries and try to really consume that for, I would dare say, usually TAFE courses are 6-month semesters. For the next period of time, really get into them. In doing so, and this is not clear from your question, but in doing so, you may well find yourself identifying the songs that really resonate with you, and that can then lead to perhaps your choices of 3 James Brown songs that you think, yeah, they're the 3 I want to do, and you know that will help. Listening is such a key part of this music game, and we don't do enough of it in the modern era of voice, and so it's always been of interest to me that, you know, the amount of people that come in for singing lessons, and I'll often ask them, so who do you listen to? And they'll kind of look off to the side and go, well, I don't really listen to singers. Wow, okay. And that's not for me to say that that's wrong, but it is for me to say they're missing out on such a big part of what can develop their singing. And so, Mr. Fomiati, I hope that proves helpful. Do you know what? I think we've done pretty well today with 3 questions. Honestly, it would not have surprised me if I had have hopped on here and we'd had no one, because, you know, besides Linda, well, and Mr. Fomiati, because, you know, Dom chimes in all the time, who are both Aussies and both students of mine. because of the Super Bowl. So thank you for coming in. And look, if you've been watching this show as a replay, I hope you've enjoyed it, because more of you watch it as a replay, but I think today many more of you will watch the show as a replay. And if that's because you were watching the Super Bowl, I hope you enjoyed it. What a spectacle. It's such a big event, and I hope your team won, as long as it was the 49ers. I'm about to hop off the live show, and I'll find out, I guess, who did win, and if Tay got proposed to, or Tay proposed to, I don't know, maybe we'll I'm about to find out. I hope you have a great week. Leave a thumbs up on the video if you could, and also next week, Kelly McDowell. We're going to talk about tongue and tone, and it's going to be, I think it's going to be really interesting, very educational and informative show, and I'm hoping you can join us then. Until such time, I will see you again next week. Have a great week, everyone. I'll talk to you soon. I'm Dr. Dan. Sing well.